Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Alcohol Free Vibes podcast. And of course, this episode is being aired the day before Halloween, the time of everything ghostly and ghouly. And of course, I know that Halloween is a very important pagan festival, Samhain, and it just feels quite magical to me. I do really enjoy this part of the year, and creating like fun witchy like rituals and practices around Halloween. And I thought in this week's podcast I would look at the idea of all that we find ghostly and ghouly and have a look at revisiting shadow work. So if you have not heard of shadow work before, let me just give you a bit of a definition of it. So shadow work, or the term shadow work, was coined by the psychologist Carl Jung, who was one of Freud's contemporaries, as I believe, and his work is still very much respected by psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists today, and it's widely accepted and used. So he coined this term, and really our shadow self, as he calls it, refers to the part of ourselves that we feel ashamed about and that we reject and that we therefore repress. And we push these parts of ourselves away. And the irony is that when we think we are rejecting and repressing these parts of ourselves, and we deny this part of ourselves, like lots of our ego is kind of like our gatekeeper to our shadow, and our ego is like, no, I don't do those things, as if I'm just going to judge other people for doing them, but I would never do that. And deep down, we know somewhere we either do those things, or we did once and we have not been able to forgive ourselves or let that go. And of course, when we used to drink, or if you are still drinking, alcohol is a great way to repress our shadow, because we've used alcohol as an anesthetic, right, to numb those things that we do not want to look at. So we all have a shadow, we all have a shadow self. And as Star Wars says, we all have light and dark within us. And the quicker we honor and understand our dark parts, the quicker we can integrate them and keep them under control, keep them managed, make friends with them, make sure we're meeting all of our like wounded needs so that they don't explode in our faces. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about all of the things that the actions that you perhaps are the most ashamed about, that you think, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, I mustn't do that. Those are examples of our shadow being repressed so much that it has exploded in our faces. So if you've got a time in your life where you can remember being like really, really aggressive, or, you know, argumentative, or doing something really spiteful or unkind that you then had a shame spiral about afterwards, that is likely to be linked to the fact that you've repressed a shadow part of yourself so much that, like a popcorn machine, it's eventually exploded, and you've spun out of control, and you've done something that has then caused you to spiral further into more shame, thus perpetuating the shadow self, because we then spiral into shame, we reject, we push away, and we're like, no, I'm not those things, and we don't look at it properly. So I'd say like the key words for shadow are shame, disgust, and like when we find people or things really irritating and annoying, that's a key sure sign that our shadow is being triggered. So we all have this, and the quicker we understand and look at our shadow, the easier it is, and that's easy is not really a word that we would use with shadow, right? But the more able we are to manage these parts of ourselves so that they are not blowing up in our faces and we're not doing things that make us feel like out of control. And a good way to kind of get to the bottom of shadow is to understand the concept that everyone in our reality is a mirror. Everyone is simply mirroring back parts of ourselves. Sometimes they mirror back things about ourselves that we really, really like. So when we meet like romantic partners and we're compatible, we're actually mirroring back the bits of us that we like. And we're like, yeah, you're like this too. Awesome. This is how we're making that connection. And then often, I mean, relationships are a great example, because as we go further down that relationship, and as it deepens, we start to mirror back parts of ourselves that we don't like, our shadow parts. And this is where many relationship arguments actually stem from, because we're mirroring each other's shadow, bits of ourselves that we do not like. And we start arguing with each other about them, but really we're just arguing with our own reflection a lot of the time. So the fact that people are our biggest mirrors, and therefore our biggest insight into our shadow self, actually then transpires to the fact that the people that irritate and annoy us the most are actually our biggest healers, because they are reflecting back our shadow self to us, the parts of ourselves that we feel the most ashamed about, and that we reject the most. If this is sounding like, oh my goodness me, I don't even know how I would navigate this, can I just first of all normalize that and say it's normal to feel like that about shadow work. Shadow work can feel overwhelming, frustrating, icky, disgusting, ugh. And actually, yeah, when I say actually, there are points of it that make you feel like you want to be sick or burst into tears or push it away and go, I don't want to look at that. That feels horrible. That means you're doing it right. And if you would like to have some support with doing a bit of a deeper dive into shadow work, then FYI, in my monthly membership this month, we are looking at shadow work in detail. So with my monthly membership, it's £30 a month. And each month we have a different theme or topic that we look at. And you get sent a self-led video training that guides you through that. You also get some journaling questions to go with that, as well as a meditation audio that links to the theme. And we have a monthly group call as well, where you can check in and join our community and kind of report back on how you are doing. So if you would like to take a deeper dive into shadow work and start kind of trying out some different tools and techniques for unpicking and integrating the parts of you that you feel ashamed and icky about, then why not give it a go? So the link for this is in the show notes to join the monthly membership. There's no there's no obligation to kind of continue the membership for a certain period of time. You can cancel at any point. The other cool thing about it is you get access to all the previous months' content as well. So there's quite a lot of content in there that you can enjoy delving into as soon as you join up, including this month's theme about revisiting shadow work. And why do we even want to do this? Well, it's one of the most powerful ways of raising our vibrations, because when we release our own fear, shame, and a kind of self-disgust, what we enable ourselves to do is we enable ourselves to get out of our own way. Because so often we put the brakes on subconsciously and we push things away because they are triggering parts of our shadow that feel unsafe. So if you have parts of your life where you're like, I don't know why I keep self-sabotaging in that area, I don't know why I can't just get myself together and do this thing. It could well be that you have a shadow belief, a shadow block there that is making your subconscious kind of put roadblocks out to stop you from doing that thing. And when you release that, you'll be like, oh, it's actually much easier than I thought it would be just to get this thing done. And of course, this links to alcohol, because if we go back to this point that people are mirrors, if you have stopped drinking alcohol, you may have noticed that if you're not going through it now, you might have been through a phase where you found other people drinking really irritating and other people's drunk behavior really irritating. Okay, now why are we doing that? If we're doing that, it's because our shadow is being triggered, because it's showing us that we have not yet forgiven ourselves or stopped feeling shame for our past drunken behavior. And actually, it's a great litmus test with our alcohol-free healing to go and check in and notice how we feel around other people who are drinking, because you will get to a point in your healing where drunk people no longer bother you at all. You might feel compassion if someone's really drunk and they're not very well, and you might want to they're your friends, sort of help them out and make sure they're okay, put them in a taxi, but you won't feel irritated or upset by it anymore. And that's a sign that you've integrated your shadow, that you've fully released that shame, and you've fully forgiven yourself for any past actions that you might have carried out when you were drinking. So I thought I'd give you some examples of my own shadow work that I've done on myself, and how like it's shown up for me. So when I first started this work, I was living in Dubai and I was working at a school as an assistant principal, or my actual title was teaching and learning coach, but it's the same as an assistant principal. Yeah, I went through a period of really not getting on with my boss at all. Like, it got super bad. And I mean, everything is happening for us, not to us. There were lots of things that happened around that time that made it very clear to me that this was not my tribe, and that I was not living in alignment, and that I was not in a situation that was serving me. And it pushed me to leave what was in lots of ways a very comfortable situation and take myself out of that and move towards something different. So it was all happening for me. But I got in this situation with somebody who I had previously got on with absolutely fine, where we just could not see eye to eye at all. And I was feeling continuously like angry and triggered around this person. And as I started to explore shadow work, it took me a long time to actually force myself to do this, because this is how shadow work works. Our ego is like, no, there's nothing wrong with me, it's all them. And then when we eventually go, okay, fine, I'm going to drag my feet and I'm going to sit down, I'm going to have a look at this, I sat down and I was like, right, what are all of the things that are really irritating me and triggering me about this person? I wrote them all down on a big list. And then I was like, okay, I have to now consider the ways in which I may have thought these things about myself at one point, or whether I still do. And as I went through that list and I started to unpick it, and I started to explore that perhaps these were my own things that I needed to look at, I was able to get myself to a point where this person, even though their actions were not always okay, they did not trigger me in the same way. I did not get upset in the same way. And I was able to manage the situation in a much more diplomatic way, to the point that by the time I left this job, we were on much better terms, and having a lot less arguments. And the shift that I noticed when I did this was actually huge. It really was. So that was the first time I really tried it. And I was like, oh, wow. And as I left that job, I remember thinking to myself, wow, you've kind of been like one of my biggest healers, because you helped me see some things that I needed to look at myself. And this is the humbling true thing about the people that we feel the most triggered by, or let's use this strong language now, people that we hate the most, can actually end up being our biggest healers. It doesn't mean that we have to like forgive unforgivable behavior, but it means that we can use it and we can alchemize it to help ourselves up level and heal in ways that make us more happy and more powerful. And actually, I say that's the first time I did shadow work. That was the first person I was able to use as a portal, if you like, to help me look at some shadow work. But the very first exercise I ever did on shadow work, I remember I was doing, if you've heard of To Be Magnetic, I still love To Be Magnetic. I think Lacey Phillips is amazing. I listen to her podcast every week. If you have not listened to it, she's so cool. I really respect everything she says. I really resonate with everything she says. She's a very intelligent, spiritual person. And one of the exercises that she gave in the shadow work module was to go to somebody who you know really well and who you trust, and ask them to tell you what your worst qualities are. And as I considered doing that exercise, I just felt sick, and I was like, I can't do it. I was like, oh, why is that? Interesting. And I thought, because if I go to my sister and I ask her to tell me all the worst things about myself, I actually know what she will say. And I don't know if I can bear to hear her say it, because I think it's going to make me cry. And actually, the thought of hearing her say those things made me cry. And I was like, okay, this already started working then. By the way, if it doesn't make you cry, you're not doing it right with shadow work, or make you feel a bit sick. So I then kind of took a slightly cowardly way out, but it was the only way I could do it at the time. I was like, right, I already know what she's going to say. So I wrote down what all of the things were that I thought she was going to say. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to do it the other way around. So I'm just going to tell her what I'm doing. And I'm going to email her the list of things that I think she's going to say. And I'm going to say, do you agree with all of these things? Is there anything you'd like to add? Or, do you want to take any off? And I sent her this email and she replied, first of all, she was very sweet because she said, I think it's amazing that you're doing shadow work. It's really hard, blah, blah, blah. But then she was like, yeah, I completely agree with everything on that list. I don't think you missed anything off. And I was like, I knew it. I knew she thought all those things. But I did feel a bit more empowered because I was like, well, I said it first. I'm not saying that is the best way to do it. That was my ego that just could not cope with her saying it. I had to say it for her, and then she just agreed. But I was very early on in my healing journey then. I was yeah. I mean, we all start healing as soon as we're conscious, but I was early on in like my more advanced stage of healing. We've already talked about the fact that when we have been drinking, we will have been doing, well, many people have found that they have been doing things they might feel ashamed of and that they cannot forgive themselves for. And of course, there were times when I first stopped drinking where I would feel irritated around other people's drinking behavior. But as I've already said, I no longer do that because I've healed and I've forgiven myself. It makes sense to me. I understand why I behaved in that way. A really, really helpful, interesting thing to consider when we are noticing other people is when you see other people who are bitching about other people's behavior or looks or whatever, their lives, those other people are showing you their shadow. And again, it's really helpful to remember this, especially if you're on the receiving end of unkind things other people are saying to you. It doesn't make their behavior okay, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't be putting boundaries out. Absolutely, you should. But it's also quite helpful to note, like, oh, that's giving me insight into their shadow and how they feel about themselves. And this isn't about me, this is about them. And then we can start to have a little bit of compassion and think, actually, that sucks that you feel like that about yourself. I'm sorry about that. Like, it's not for me to worry about, but yeah, that's sad that you feel like that about yourself. And that's, just with all of these things, we can let things go when they make sense. And when we can understand why people might be saying unkind things and we can make sense of it, we can be like, that's on them, not me. That's their own shadow work for them to be doing. So if you found any of this resonate with you, if it made you realize that you have got some stuff you'd like to look at in terms of your shadow, you'd like some support with this, why not try out the Sober and Soulful membership? £30 a month. I've popped the link in the show notes. Get yourself joined up to that. You'll really like the monthly Zoom calls. You don't have to join them, of course, but they are really supportive and friendly. And there's lots of content in there already that you can enjoy working your way through. And learning lots about spiritual healing and up-leveling to manifest more in sobriety. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to me today. If you would like to have the chance of winning a free one-to-one coaching session with me, then I'd love it if you could leave me a 5-star review. All you need to do is take a screenshot of the review and send it to me at thrive@coachingbyanneka.co.uk, and I would love to connect with you. If you would like to connect with me further and you'd like to download my free guide, then please go to my website and you can do that and you'll be added to my mail list. Or if you would just like to book in a free discovery call with me, then you can do so via my email address or through my website. All of these links will be in the show notes. And I hope you have a wonderful, magical, sober week, and I will see you this time next week.